Does EA just hate Star Wars? Because I can't really think of why else they would treat this franchise so poorly. Or do they hate the fans? Do they hate Star Wars fans, so they don't want them to have a good game? Or is it just like their goal to take awesome games made by their development teams and turn them into as much trash as possible and then punish the developers when they don't sell? As I'm sure most of you have heard, EA just recently closed Visceral, the development team behind the Dead Space series. In my opinion, Dead Space 1 and 2 are still the truest follow-ups to Resident Evil 4. Actually, in my opinion, taking the next step in evolving the survival horror genre. But what happened to the series? Well, EA did what they do best. Oh, you know, their market research said people like multiplayer. The kids, they like that co-op. And hey, you know we can make more money off the game through, you guessed it, their favorite, microtransactions. And who would have guessed, the more input EA had on the series, the quicker it was shoved right into its grave. Yeah, one of the few constants in the gaming industry is that when your company signs with EA, it essentially just signed its own death warrant. Unless you want to become a microtransaction factory, EA has made it clear they won't have use for you for long. So while much of EA's resources currently have gone into their upcoming loot box fest, Star Wars Battlefront 2, the highly anticipated follow-up to the most, I'll say it, the most disappointing Star Wars game of all time. God, to think EA's Battlefront is technically the sequel to the original Star Wars Battlefront 2, one of the most widely beloved shooters of all time. How depressing is that? But anyway, since EA has the exclusive game rights to the Star Wars IP, of course, they're concerned with pumping out loot boxes in space, the shooter, tons of garbage mobile games, also filled with microtransactions, of course. Basically, if it sounds exploitive and awful, that's what EA is trying to do with one of the biggest IPs in the world. But on the side, these last couple years, we've had Visceral Games working on their own title. A single-player game? Wait, what? A, quote, story-based linear adventure set in the Star Wars universe? Okay, starting to pique my interest. We got Star Wars, the creators of Dead Space, a single-player game. But you know what? Don't get too excited, because accompanied by the announcement that Visceral is being shut down, EA has added that the game is going to need a major overhaul to get it where they want. Again, to quote, this is from EA directly, "Throughout the development process, we've been testing the game concept with players, listening to the feedback about what and how they want to play, and closely tracking fundamental shifts in the marketplace. It has become clear that to deliver an experience that players will want to come back to and enjoy for a long time to come, we need to pivot the design. We will maintain the stunning visuals, authenticity in the Star Wars universe, and focus on bringing a Star Wars story to life. Importantly, we are shifting the game to be a broader experience that allows for more variety and player agency, leaning into the capabilities of the Frostbite engine and reimagining central elements of the game to give players a Star Wars adventure of greater depth and breadth to explore." The way I read this, and I've seen many others agree, it sounds very much like whatever they had, they're turning it into something multiplayer focus. Phrases like having players come back to and enjoy for a long time, greater depth and breadth to explore, makes me think massively multiplayer. Again, and they're also saying tracking shifts in the marketplace. I'd concur with a lot of others who I've seen talk about this, that to me, if I was to put a bet on what this game will end up looking like, I would say Destiny. Whatever this title was going to be is not at all what it's going to end up as. And with something like, an MMO shooter type deal, it makes the most sense for EA, as that's something that they can argue is a truly immersive Star Wars experience while having the maximum amount of options to milk players with their awful microtransactions, DLC, and I'm sure loot boxes will be in there. And yeah, I'll admit, I do get some pleasure out of ripping on EA because they're just awful. They're horrible. But I feel for Star Wars fans here, I really do. You know, God, I remember back in the day, the Super Star Wars games, we had Knights of the Old Republic series, right? And it's like now, you know, oh, Knights of the Old Republic, that's still a thing, but it's an MMO. We had that Star Wars 1313 game, remember that one? That was the code name for it. You were going to be like a bounty hunter. And it was a stellar, the graphics looked amazing. It was like a third-person action shooter, single-player experience again. But, of course, that was canceled. I mean, I know there's tons of people out there, big Star Wars fans, who are salivating for this kind of game. A solo experience that actually allows you to be immersed in the Star Wars world. And unfortunately, you have EA, of all companies, deciding the fate of this franchise. I mean, could it be in worse hands? I honestly don't know. But what seems infinitely more clear is EA's intentions. They just want to milk this franchise for all it's worth, and they clearly aren't concerned with actually making a quality title. It's all about what can make them the most money, and if you follow me, you know, I'm not against companies trying to maximize their profits. But I've also mentioned my issues with microtransactions, loot boxes, etc. in recent videos. You know, I think this is more of a short money deal. I think this is going to come back to bite a lot of these devs on the ass. I mean, gamers en masse are already speaking out against these loot box systems, and the more and more these companies try to shove them down the gamer's throat, the more pushback I think they're going to see. And I think maybe not immediately, but I think within the next year or so, a lot of these games that continue to do this, they're going to see their sales suffer immensely. And again, when it comes to acquiring these developers, it seems like EA just wants the name of a lot of these companies, you know, your BioWares, your Viscerals, like, oh, you know, these companies are famous for these types of games, Visceral with the survival horror, BioWare with the RPG adventures. You know, a lot of these things, they start out great, but as time goes on, it's like EA just gets to that point where they're like, okay, how do we just milk this sucker dry, and then when they're done with it, these companies go to the curb. I mean, they have a long list of companies that they've acquired and closed within a couple years. This happens at EA all the time. And like I said, it just seems like EA is only concerned with what can make them the most money at this moment, like right now. They don't seem to really have any grasp on like the future, and that's why I feel like the name, you know, EA as a brand, it's just like been dragged through the mud. I mean, is there a less respected, honestly, answer me in the comments, is there a company that is more hated in the gaming industry than EA? I honestly don't think there is. And they've done it all to themselves. No one can argue that they don't have the resources, right? They don't have the game creators to make awesome games. But like I said, it's like they refuse. They just, what's going to make us the most money today? And I think it's going to catch up with them. I really do. And with that, this video's a wrap. Let me know in the comments, do you think EA is making too many dumb moves with such a valuable franchise like Star Wars? Do they just hate the fans of Star Wars? Do you think they're going to regret it down the line? And same with the teams they acquire. Is everyone just totally disposable in their eyes? They have no interest in actually building these companies up and having them be a long-term success? I mean, just look at a lot of these companies they've acquired in their trajectory. Look at BioWare now versus BioWare just a few years ago. I mean, it's a joke. Anyway, let me know. As always, I'm John Zakari, and thanks for watching.